Janice.
All right, here we go. Welcome, everyone. Welcome back. We'll give folks a few seconds to get in, get situated, get comfortable. If you were here for part one, you are definitely in for a treat with part two, and we are so glad to have you back with us.
Welcome, everybody. I'd like to note that
All right. So it looks like folks are still trickling in. So as they come in, we'll go ahead and get started. As I mentioned, this is Indigenous Seed Stories. This time we're talking about opportunities and collaborations. This is part two in this series for today. If you were in part one, that was extremely powerful. So we know part two is going to bring a lot of wonderful stories and some how-tos on how to work together in a collaboration. As I mentioned before, the NOFA New York Winter Conference and the Northeast Organic Seed Conference, they do partner every 2 years. And we are participating in the third collaboration. And I do hope that you've gotten to as many workshops as you could, both in the Seed Conference and the NOFA New York Winter Conference. I've had the pleasure of going to a few in both, and they have been outstanding. My name is Anna Muhammad. I was with you this morning and at some of the sessions. I work, garden, do community gardening work in the city of Springfield, Massachusetts, which is Pecumtuck Nation. I do work for NOFA Mass, which is NOFA New York sister organization. And myself, along with Robert Perry, will be working together as your Zoom techs in the background. So anytime you have any questions on Zoom issues, you can let either one of us know. And as we've mentioned throughout the conference, this would have been so much nicer if we were together in person, able to shake hands, give hugs after long travel. But we know in this age of COVID, we had to pivot. That is the word of the year. So we're going to work as hard as we can to duplicate that same feeling of community. And I think we've achieved that this weekend. So before I turn everything over to Liz and her team, I just want to share a few housekeeping items. Some of this you have already seen, so I'm not going to spend too much time on some things. Number one, our community agreements. You have seen this throughout the conference. They're on the screen right now. They're in your socio book, which has been a great resource. I hope you all have referred to it. But in just really the whole idea of the community agreements, we want to be respectful, mindful to each other, and most importantly, patient as we're working through the Zoom technology world. Sometimes technology is not always our friend. And just real quick, if you're going to use any jargon, try to spell it out. It's very easy to throw around acronyms and so forth. We just want to be mindful and make sure that we're all on the same page together. What you see on the screen now is the Native Land Acknowledgement. NOFA New York, we've mentioned it throughout the conference, both conferences. We want to be respectful, pay homage and honor to the land that was managed and inhabited before European colonization. As I mentioned, I am coming from Pecumtuck land, which is Springfield, Mass. We have here a map where you can look to find what land that you are inhabiting now that was occupied. If you want, I will put this in the chat so you can actually view where you are in the country. It shows the entire country, and it's actually a very good tool. The In Living Color virtual space has been another wonderful tool that NOFA New York has provided. The facilitators, Amanda David and Mandana Bushi, they have been great facilitators. They did have a closing ceremony today. Hopefully you got a chance to catch it. They will still be available if you need anything from them. They're on call, and their email addresses are listed here. They're also in your program book. And please stay in contact with them even after the conference is over. Our keynote speakers, they have done a wonderful job. I know there's one going on right now, but the good thing is they are recorded. You can go back in the socio program book and actually replay them. I had the chance to assist with the Zoom work for Banu, and she was totally wonderful. So please catch that one, and Laura Lignit, they both were wonderful. In these last two slides, the University of Vermont have provided note takers that will assist in a needs assessment. Two note takers should be in this session, and if they can identify themselves in the chat, that way you get a chance to know who will be taking notes here. Now, this is part of a needs assessment. The notes will center on current and future priorities for the seed communities. No personal or identifiable information will be in those notes. It's just looking at priorities, opportunities, and challenges, and all that information will be compiled into a narrative in the next coming months that the public can comment and provide feedback on. We will also discuss this in the needs assessment day, which is tomorrow. And we're inviting everyone to come back with us tomorrow. The Northeast Organic Seed System and all of its diverse participants, we will be coming together in collaboration with the University of Vermont to develop a needs assessment, which will identify strengths and challenges and brainstorm steps necessary to build resilience in the region. You see the schedule there on the screen. It is free. I will put the link in the chat that you can use to access this tomorrow. And again, I really invite everyone to come out and participate in that. So without any more from myself, I am very excited about part 2 of this session. And like I said, if you were in part 1, part 2 is going to be just as outstanding. So I will turn everything over to Elizabeth to take us further. So Elizabeth, it's all yours.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Anna. Big props to Anna, who has helped us in all of our practice runs and today with all of the technology. It's a big comfort knowing that she's there to help us out. So thank you all for joining us. Our afternoon panel as part of the series on Indigenous seed stories is about opportunities and collaboration. So looking at times when Native communities have collaborated with their neighbors as part of this effort to revitalize and maintain and bring back Indigenous seeds. So we have a great lineup for you today, and we're going to start with Janice Brant, who is from Tyendinaga. Janice is a teacher, seed keeper, gardener, storyteller, artist, historian, and cook. She does it all. You can tell from that amazing studio that she's sitting in there. She's got the tools for everything. She sits with the Bear Clan and is Ganikahaga from Tyendinaga, Mohawk territory in Ontario, Canada. She was born and raised on the reservation and still enjoys farming, fishing, and learning from the land and her community. She continues to study and practice Ganyageha, which is Mohawk language, and attends ceremonies and seed gatherings from across Haudenosaunee territory. Janice was introduced to seed saving as a child. It was part of their home life and on her parents' farm. It's a combination of modern and traditional agriculture. As early as 5 years ago, she kept and tended her own gardens as continued through her life, along with being a professor and later a Mohawk language and culture teacher in her community. Today, Janice is a volunteer and co-chair of, and you're going to have to, Janice will tell us the proper pronunciation of her organization because it's a long word. And my Mohawk language needs a lot of work. So I'm going to let her introduce it. But this organization is a local nonprofit organization founded by members of the Mohawks of the Bay of Quinte and is host to a living seed collection of 300 Indigenous and heirloom seed varieties of vegetables, herbs, and flowers. The Seed Sanctuary and Learning Center is located in Tyendinaga Mohawk territory and was established in 2018. And it's the first Indigenous seed sanctuary in Canada that we know about, with this innovative action toward the seed conservation, protection, and preservation and sharing seed, saving education for future generations of seed custodians, gardeners, and farmers. So this morning we've asked Janice to kind of do double duty. She's going to, Anna gave us kind of a welcome from the whole NOFA organization, and Janice is going to give us a brief kind of Onglahoney welcome to this space right here, and then is going to tell us a little bit more about the work that she's doing in Tyendinaga. So thank you, Janice, for taking on this double duty as part of the panel today.
Yeah, I'll go. Thank you, Elizabeth. So I just want to start out with a small greeting, I guess, that we give greetings and thanksgiving to the people. We give greetings and thanks to our mother. She's the earth. we give thanks to the water. Vietanu Haradone, Odera Sum'a, we give thanks to the roots. I skipped the fish. Vietanu Haradone, Ganjo Sum'a, we give thanks to the fish. Vietanu Haradone, Ochende Sum'a, Dana Oji. We give green thanks to the grass and the flowers. Vietinu Haradone, Gahik Sum'a, Dana Onunkwa Sum'a, we give thanks to the berries and to the medicines. Vietinu Haradone, Junhetkwa, Ne Anha, Tugumwidigowana, Ne Asunigunda Degon Ogun, Onaste, Ono Ozra, Dono Ozaheda. We give greetings and thanks to all the sustenance that's for life, including some of the leaders, the three sisters, corn, beans, and squash. Dietinu Haradone, Gundirio, we give thanks to the animals. Dietinu Haradone, Garunda Su'a, Dana Ogude Su'a, the big and small trees, we greet them. Haradone, Ojidan Ogun'a, we give thanks to the birds. Dietinu Haradone, Gaeri Nyongoedige, we give thanks to the winds from all the directions. Dietinu Haradone, Yeti Sutta Sutaneka Garakwa, we give thanks to our grandmother, the moon, and we greet her. Dietinu Haradosne, Yeti Togo Radiweras, we give greetings and thanks to the thunder beings. Dietinu Haradosne, Echitawajia Jokanaka Garakwa, our elder brother, the sun, we give him greetings and thanksgiving. Dietinu Haradosne, Ojisto Kwarun, again, we give thanks to all the stars and Dietinu Haradone, Sungwaya Diso, and we give thanks for creation and everything that's made that gives us life. And so that's just a really small, kind of on the spot, abbreviated opening words that puts our minds together as one in the spirit of all creation. And so Nyawa, for giving me that opportunity. Well, I want to hopefully ask maybe my brother Kenny if he would close, or if someone would be able to close at the end, even just short words. Just because that's how we do things. If we open, we undo it by a closing as well. So my Mohawk name, my Ginyunkihaga name is Gahet Dokta, and that means she goes to the end of the garden. And it's not just like the meaning that something goes the length of the garden, but I understand from older speakers that it means that someone also that makes a great effort. So that someone that goes to the end of the garden, it makes a great effort. So follows it through, I guess. And so I feel really honored to have that name. And I am really honored that I sit with the Bear Clan in the Mohawk Nation. And it's such a good place of learning and just connecting with people and culture. So I'm really grateful. I'm from Tyndonega. I was born and raised here. I still live on the same farm I was raised on. I just live not in the same house. That's the only difference. So thank you for reading for the introduction, because it does tell a lot about me. But I started tending my own gardens when I was about 5 years old. And that probably would be normal most of the time, a long time ago. But when you're surrounded by people gardening and farming, then they're your role models. And so you copy everything they do just by, accident, you just do. And for a long time, I cared so much about seeds when I was little And then when I was older and went to university, I tried to leave that part of my life behind and to move away from a farming lifestyle. But it turned out that that didn't work out for me. And I'm really glad that it didn't. And that when I would get off my path, I was steered back to the gardens and to home. And I want to tell a funny little story before I get into the really deep stuff. While we've been working on this project, this is before COVID, I was at the gas station and I saw my teacher from grade 3. And that's the great thing about living in a small community. So she's in her 70s now, but I saw her and I waved and she smiled, and I decided to walk over and talk to her about what we were working on, about the seed sanctuary. As I approached her, she sort of looked at me and she said, "Is this about seeds?" Without any words out of my mouth. And I thought, well, I guess that's the reputation that I have in the community. And funny that she said that, because she's also a beloved seed keeper. And she said to me, "Do you know you have always been like this?" And so I feel lucky and glad that I was born in a community that cared about seeds and agriculture, and that, at least for some of us, that has been passed on. And if I can help, I'd like that to go on for many more years, even though we are sort of becoming an urban environment. So anyway, hope you like that little story. I guess I'd like to start with the first slide of the presentation. I was going to have Elizabeth help me with that if possible. Hope everyone can see the beautiful photo of our youth holding a wampum belt, a modern wampum belt that was made in 2019. And this wampum belt is the story, or is the record of the story of a seed rematriation between the community of Tyendinaga Mohawk territory and the Sisters of Providence in Kingston, which is about 45 minutes drive from us. And so these Sisters of Providence at their convent mother house on their own private property had gardens, and they were raising some of their own foods and whatnot. And their farm was a 100-acre organic farm that they had purchased many years ago and have been living there since. And what happened in 2017 was we found out through a friend of ours that the sisters were retiring some of their missions. And one of their missions was an heirloom seed collection that they were caring for 20 years. And actually the collection, we learned later, was much older than that, and that it's probably more like 40 years old. And so all of these heirloom seeds have been together as a family for all this time. And so they were hoping to find maybe some folks, a community, or some people that would like to take over the seed collection and continue their mission, I guess, so to speak, by caring for these seeds. And so our community became a candidate to be the recipients of the seeds. And once we heard about the seeds and that they were looking for a home, we started, so I say we, my friend Kate and I decided that if she was willing to visit us from the seed sanctuary in Kingston, that we would have a meeting to introduce the community to this concept of hosting an heirloom seed collection. And so I say it's heirloom, and that's what they were calling it at the time. But what we realized quickly was that many of the seeds were indigenous, and there are over 70 kinds of beans in the collection. Instantly, we, as a community, when we hosted the first meeting, had quite a large number of people. And it was kind of an information session, which led to some consultation sessions. But some of this, I'm really thankful that we recorded those consultation meetings, because some of the things that the elders and the community members shared about their connection to seed and gardens and why we should have it and why we should bring it back was absolutely beautiful and incredible. And so it seemed like quickly, there was no question. We were wanting to learn more about this. And a small group formed out of the consultation meetings. And that group called themselves, and this is the word that Elizabeth was talking about. So we called ourselves in Ganyongeha, Radi Nahayantos. And Radi Nahayantos means they are farmers of seeds, or they are seed farmers. And it has an S on the end, which means it's habitual and they just keep doing it, which we felt was really important. Because one thing we don't want is for this to stop. And for many of the great reasons that Terry Lynn and Angela and the other speakers talked about this morning, was very powerful. So after the consultations and after the formation of Radi Nahayantos, we met with the sisters at a formal meeting. And in the custom of the Haudenosaunee, we brought gifts, we wore our proper attire. We wanted to, show them who we really are. And when we went there, it was really quite powerful, because they're a very spiritual group. And so are we. And so instantly, through our ways, there was this connection. And so they started to ask us about our interest in the seeds. And so one of our Radi Nahayantos members in the delegation, she started to tell a bit of the story of Sky Woman, and that some of those seeds came from there and were brought here. And then some of those seeds evolved here and were created here. But that we have a deep spiritually rooted connection to the seeds and to our foods, and that we have an entire cycle of ceremony that rates them in their order and as they ripen and as we harvest and plant. And so it's all sort of laid out for us. And I think we were surprised, because immediately they said, "This is wonderful. We wanted to hear about your culture, but we had no idea about the spiritual connection to the seeds." And that was similar to them. So one of the ways that we started to form our relationship was common ground, finding something we all believed in and could agree to, and that we valued and that we cared about. And so that became the foundation on which our relationship was built. Because I will honestly say, I have a friend in Ganawage, and he said to me, "Geez, Janice, you guys are working with the sisters like nuns, right?" And I'm like, yeah, we are. He goes, "But so many of us are afraid of them, And I said, "I know." And I said, we weren't sure either. And I said, but until we got there, until we met them, and yeah, I can see some of the stories that he was telling me, even just in the short period of interacting with the sisters, I could see what he meant by some of the things that may have happened. But I could also be open-minded and think about reconciliation, and also think about this opportunity. So what ended up happening was we applied for a small grant, and we received some funding to purchase the beads to make the wampum belt. And so the wampum belt was an idea that came to our group, because we said, why can't we make a formal record? Why can't we make a wampum belt to more event where these seeds are coming home? Because as much as it was the sisters passing the seeds to us, it was really they were being passed back to us, and which seems so appropriate today. And so there's that part. But we built this wampum belt. Some of the sisters wove it. A great number of people from Tyndonega wove it. So what we did was we set up events, and we would have a teaching about this, about what we're doing with the seeds, and that we were that we were a candidate to receive this seed collection, and why we were making this belt to symbolize this event that was happening. And also, of course, like the meaning of wampum belts and the history. So I'll just tell you a little bit about the image you see before you. There are two figures that look human-like, and between them is passing a line of white from there. So it comes from the edge and it goes all the way to that person. And that shows that those seeds were passed to the sisters. And now the sisters are passing those forward now to Redinaha, Hayantos, and to others. And so in between the two human figures is a mound. And that's to represent like the hills that we plant in. And from the line, the solid line going across, there's some seeds coming down, it shows, and going into the mound. And so it's not just about simply the action or act of passing seeds, it's passing the knowledge, the skills, and all the things that it takes to take care of these seeds, including the songs, the stories, and the recipes that accompany them. So this is sort of the seed rematriation story of our community. And I hope I haven't left anything out about that. So I guess I have. The rematriation ceremony took place in April 2019. So it was that recent, that new. And we received 300 heirloom varieties of vegetable herbs and flowers. And many of them have indigenous roots. We have to do the research, we have to do the documentation, but we are prepared to do that. Okay, maybe the next slide. My husband's saying that I'm running out of time. That may be so. So that's how the seeds arrived in our care anyway. And what is a seed sanctuary? That was the question we asked ourselves when we were doing the community consultations. Of course, like, how do we care for a seed collection, and what do we do? And how do we own it as a community, not as an individual? And so what do we have to do to make that happen? And so we liked the idea that the sisters kind of had foraged ahead of us, which was a seed sanctuary idea. And what we liked so much about it was that a seed sanctuary is implying something about the sacred and about the spiritual. And that invites us into that space in that way. And so we're really glad that we've been able to achieve that. And so on the slide you see, there's an aerial view that was taken by an APTN, an Aboriginal Peoples Television Network photographer, when they came to visit us and do a small story about the seed sanctuary. So what you see here is basically not quite a complete circle, because ahead of the trees is a teaching area. And then these are the gardens. And of course they have to be fenced just to protect them from animals and things. But there are basically 28 garden beds here that we can use for rotation and for different growing activities and for growing out the seed collection. And what we hope also is that, you know, we can share some of the seed gardening byproduct, which is the food, with our community. So also the next slide, it just talks, it just shows, so Indigenous and heirloom seed conservation is our main priority here at Gundagai Seed Sanctuary. So taking care of the seed collection is a priority. But then we also want to expand the collection to host varieties very specifically and localized in Tyendinaga. What we found out through some of our consultation was that there's quite a bit of older people that have seeds that would like to share them on, but don't have necessarily someone that they can share them on to, that they feel is knowledgeable and able to take care of them successfully. So we're we're hoping, and so this year we introduced the Dwayne Baptiste bean as our first local indigenous variety to the collection. I guess we're getting anxious to add our own communities as seeds to this. And we also find it really important to honor every part of who we are in this process. We try to use our language, we try to use our traditional openings for all of our gatherings because it helps us bring our minds to that spiritual sacred place for working with the seeds and the seed gardens. But what we also hope to do is to be able to revitalize maybe varieties that need some help, like seed varieties maybe that are endangered, that maybe through our operations at the Seed Sanctuary, we will be able to host them, and then maybe even as they become healthy and viable, then begin to rematriate them back out to the communities that they maybe originally came from. And that's like a pretty big vision that we have. But I feel like Indigenous people think big and think very holistically. So I think that's just part of our way to see it very holistically and interconnected. And we just want to do a good job at making high quality local organic seed so that when people grow, they're growing very successfully with the seeds that they have, and that they're good seeds to save and share with their family and their friends, so that we can create a stronger local seed and food system overall. And even to be able to extend that to other communities in the surrounding area, but also in the Confederacy. And it's not that we don't want to help other people too, but we want to be a role model for localization of seeds, like regional adaptations. I know someone, I think it must have been Angie this morning, that said it's not climate change, it's climate adaptation. And I was so glad to hear her say that, because that's the same way we're thinking here. And the next slide there is just really, I'll do it really quickly, is about kind of the things that we're presently doing. So I gave you a little history of the rematriation and how that happened. And then now that we're set up and going, although we struggle because it's difficult to get resources for these kinds of things, and we're working hard on that. So what are we doing? One, we follow the seasons. We follow the pattern of nature. So if it's too wet to go on the land, we don't. If it's like, you know, we just follow the seasons in every way. When it's time for planting, then we're out there doing that. And we just kind of, yeah. So one of the fun things that we have been doing, and we started it kind of as an annual event. And so this big photo that you see with lots of people gathered around the beds, this was our very first, this was our 2019, and it was our very first ever time to host the Seed to Salsa event. And so we grew all of the ingredients, but ahead of making the salsa was the process of seed saving. So they save seeds from the peppers and tomatoes. And then with the leftover part of those, they made the salsa. And it was just so much fun. And we had community members of all ages. And everybody just, it was like people just lingered around after. They enjoyed themselves so much. So that's just one event. We host seed saving events, workshops, most of them in the context of educating about seed saving, why it's important, why it's needed, how we can help out, how you can get involved. So we do lots of seed cleaning and whatnot with folks, and they even help us to package the seeds. So that's really helpful. We get a lot of help from volunteers. Actually, we're all volunteers, to be totally honest, which is something Terry Lynn said this morning, is about, you know, resources can be hard to come by, and sometimes we have them and sometimes we don't. And so we have to figure things out and prepare ourselves in ways. And it's surprising like how far you can go with just a group of volunteers. But we do hope to formally hire our gardener and possibly a coordinator for the Seed Sanctuary. I hope people will ask questions about this later, because I know I'm going kind of fast. So the last slide, I'm proud to say, it's a picture of my niece. She's been with Ready Najantos since we formed. She is part of our youth board that advises us and what they would like. And they also come out and help with the gardens. And this is her taking her first try at utilizing a wheel hoe. And so even though we don't use tons of equipment, a lot of our, we do low till or no till, and plus like all kinds of like indigenous methods of farming. But this wheel hoe is kind of fun, and it is fun to add implements here and there to do things different. But one of our hopes and one of our goals is to create a youth internship mentorship program that gives them opportunities to learn about all the aspects of the Gandege Seed Sanctuary Indigenous and Heirloom Seed Collection, how it's grown, so that they later can be the curators of the collection. And we also want to make sure there's intergenerational opportunities for learning through all the community, with all community members, because I guess it's real. I mean, we all eat, we all need food. And so it's important for us to all have some information about this and to have a connection and to feel a connection to these things, not just in the grocery store, but actually on the land. And so a little bit, I will close with saying, part of the way the Seed Sanctuary is set up is that we only keep what seed is needed to maintain the collection viability and health. All surplus seed, we then work with volunteers and we sort it, clean it, package it, label it, and then it gets distributed. It's not like a seed bank. We don't capture seed and keep it for long periods in cold temperatures. We are growing the seeds out year after year, following the cycle of nature, so that they too can adapt to climate just like us. And that later, these seeds will know how to grow. These seeds will always know how to grow because they're always being adapted and cared for. And so I really appreciate being invited to share about this initiative in our community. And thank you so very much. Nyawa.
I'm just jabbering away to myself over here. Thank you, Janice. As I was saying, next up we have another team presenting from another seed sanctuary, this one a little bit south of there. So I'll let them decide which order they are going to present in. But for introductions, we have Kay Greene, who in 2004 started a seed library in the public library. Seeds swept them away and they quit their job to follow seeds. Kay and their partner Doug Muller grew the library into the Hudson Valley Seed Company, a national seed company and regional seed farm devoted to ethically producing seed for home gardeners and farmers and celebrating seeds through art. Today, Kay is the founder and director of Seedshed, a nonprofit organization focused on seed justice for seed beings. And then presenting alongside Kay, we have Kenny Perkins, who is a Mohawk from the Akwesasne territory in upstate New York. Kenny is currently employed with the Seedshed in Hudson Valley, working in collaboration with the Hudson Valley Farm Hub and the Akwesasne Freedom School to work with rematriated lands to increase Haudenosaunee heirloom seeds. This project has provided an opportunity to heal the intergenerational traumas suffered by the displacement of his people and their precious seeds. Reintroducing these seeds to their original homelands is also an opportunity to work toward food sovereignty for his community. Kenny has also worked for the Akwesasne Cultural Restoration Program as a master gardener, teaching a 4-year program of Mohawk language and traditional and modern gardening to 4 apprentices. Kenny also sat as lead uncle for the rites of passage, facilitating traditional teachings to 60 youth, preparing them to fast up to 4 days and 4 nights. As a result, many of the fasters came out with a testimony to plant. He then started a Haudenosaunee Three Sisters garden of traditional corn, beans, and squash with the fasters. Kenny's vision is to bridge the relationship gap between human beings and seeds. So thank you, and take it away, Kenny and Kay.
I reckon I'll start first. My name is Kenny Perkins. I am from Akwesasne. I'm a Mohawk Bear Clan. Um, I guess what I'm going to talk about today is a collaboration that I have between the Hudson Valley Farm Hub of Kingston area, Hudson Valley area, the Seedshed, who I am employed with right now, and a partnership with the Akwesasne Freedom School. So just to take us back to the beginning of how this all started, it brings us back to like 2016. And at that time, I was working for Strong Roots. It was a community garden initiative that I was employed to help to grow. At the same time, I was also the lead uncle for the Rites of Passage. And in there, I was also doing a separate garden. And so the fasters, when they went out early spring, just before the bugs are actually when the bugs just first come out. But when they came out, I was very surprised that the fourth years that were in there 4 days and 4 nights, each had a story of getting back to our traditional foods. And this is something that in my community I've been trying to do for quite a while now, and met with some resistance just because of the pure fact it was easier to go to Hannaford's or Price Chopper or Walmart or wherever. And so I had to compete with that. And changing the palettes in my community was very, very, very tough. But people know me in Akwesasne as a gardener, and the Rites of Passage came out one by one, like I said, and they said they were visited by the corn, they were visited by the food, our traditional foods. And so to me, I was in my head saying, thank you for helping me out, because I felt at that time I didn't have a lot of support. Every time I mentioned, let's go to the garden, let's get back to our traditional foods, I was always met with resistance and eye rolling, like, because it's work and it's hard work. And if you don't understand it, then it's harder to do until you get to enjoy it, until you get to put your hands in the dirt and actually work with the seeds and get in there, then you really don't understand that relationship. So we planted a Three Sisters garden. And you can see in a picture here, these are some of our Rites of Passage kids that were in there. And so what we did to fund kind of the things that we needed to do, like buy trays and buy pots and hose and things like that, wheelbarrows, we had a plant sale. So we did plant sales of tomatoes, green peppers, different things like that, different plants that people eat every day. But at the same time, we had a traditional Three Sisters garden, which was incorporated actually into our Rites of Passage ceremony that we had. So the teachings that came along with that to the kids was also very, very powerful, because there's a story right from creation that comes from these Three Sister gardens and the teaching that comes along with it. And so I began to teach these kids from seed to table, growing the seeds, taking care of them, weeding it during the summer, which nobody loved to do, but then at the end, harvesting everything. And then in the meantime, learning about why we have ceremony, when we have ceremony, the planting season, and the camaraderie that just comes with having a group of kids and people and adults like this come together and sit at a table and enjoy the fruits of their labor, sitting down at that table to eat. And I try to do that at every workshop that I do, every gathering that I would try to sit at that table and eat what we've planted, and eat what we've processed, and things like that. So at that time, this is what we were doing. Then we were visited by Bob Dandrew and Brooke Pickering from the Hudson Valley Farm Hub. And they came down and showed interest because Bob was part Mohawk, and it seemed to me that he wanted to get back to his roots and kind of said that, you know, why don't we do a garden in Hudson Valley? and kind of work that out. And at the same time, while I was doing the Hologo garden, Rowan White had these seeds, these Mohawk red corn seeds. And you can see her in the picture here. And they were on their way out, I guess. There was only a few cobs left. There wasn't that strain, there wasn't that many left. And she reached out to her friend, Ken Greene. And I think at this point, I'd like to have Ken kind of come about how that relationship started. And so I guess this story, what I'm getting to is all the stars aligned, the seed spoke to us, and we all came together at this one juncture, at this one point in time for this relationship to happen. So I kind of want Ken to talk more about the relationship and what that interaction was between him and Rowan. So Ken, if you can take it from there.
Sure. So I've been doing seed work for many years in different capacities, and Rowan and I had been doing other things together and being in touch with each other and being on sort of our own paths, but with connection between us. And she had come to visit me here at our seed farm, and when she was leaving, she handed me 3 different varieties of beans. And she said, these seeds are telling me that they want to return to the soil here. This is their home soil. This is their home earth. And would you grow them here so that they can be in their soil? And then when you've harvested them, you can mail them back to me. So then she left, she got on the road, and Bob Dandrew, who was the director at Hudson Valley Farm Hub, called me, not knowing that Rowan had been here, not knowing what was happening, and said, you know, I have this idea. I know you're starting this organization called Seedshed that wants to do seed rematriation work. I run the Hudson Valley Farm Hub. We have land, we have equipment. What if your seed sanctuary idea started here and was a partnership with Akwesasne? So it was what Rowan has said, and what I feel, and what Kenny and I have talked about too, is the seeds were putting out the call. As soon as they were handed off to return to the soil here, they reached out to say, who can help with this? Who can help make this happen? So I called Rowan immediately. She was like somewhere in like Nebraska or something by then. And I said, you know, this organization reached out to me. We could make this happen. Like, what do you think? And Rowan said, well, we need to talk to people in Akwesasne first. We can't just make this decision and say, we're going to start doing this. The relationship needs to happen with people at home. And so that's when Bob went up to visit and met Kenny. And Kenny, do you want to share a little bit about that first meeting?
Yeah, it was kind of interesting. Bob and Brooke showed up, and they had bread and they had things to eat with them that they had brought from the Hudson Valley, and all Hudson Valley food is just ridiculously good. But we had a big meeting with the tribe, the St. Regis Mohawk tribe and the Mohawk Council of Akwesasne. And then there was the little faction of the Hologo garden people there. We just got out of the garden. We were all dirty. Our boots are still muddy. I mean, we were hungry. We were in our garden clothes where everybody else was dressed up in like their, you know, tribal uniforms, I guess, suits and whatnot. But yeah, we were kind of underdressed for that day. But everybody said their piece, and then Ken Jock, who was the director for the environment division, he said, let's hear from Kenny and what they're doing. And so we put me on the spot, and I had just broken off a big piece of bread that Bob Dandrew had brought. And I was just tearing a big piece off because there was no knife there to cut it. So of course he calls me out this time when my mouth is full. So I had to kind of hurry up and chew and explain what we were doing. And I explained that the kids went out into the fast I explained what we do with them, how we have ceremony, and how we do this. This is how we nurture our plants and our children. This is how. And he, after that, he's like, "We want Kenny." So we ended up taking a few people and along with Mary Arquette, myself, and a couple other people, and we went to go and see what we could do about bringing our seeds back to the land where they first come from. I thought it was a great idea, but I got to tell you, I was very suspicious at first. Being Mohawk, you know, we had all this land a long time ago to plant on, and then now we're stuck on this little 6x6 piece of land, and this is where you're going to grow now. And just the thought that, hey, we could bring these back and grow it in our original territories, it was a really cool idea. And at the same time, it felt to me like the seeds were also saying, we want to go home. We don't really live here. We can live here for a little while, but we want to go home. That's how I felt. And so I had to break that barrier down because I wasn't willing to share. I didn't want to do that because I just felt like enough has been taken from us, and to go and do this somewhere else with our seeds didn't feel right. But what did feel right was that they wanted to go home. And so I dropped those barriers down a little bit, being that suspicious Mohawk man, to allow myself to think that there is something bigger happening right now than just me, and that I need to let this happen. And so after I got to know Ken, after I got to know Bob, after I got to know Brooke at the farm hub in Hudson Valley, in the Seedshed, and what their intentions were, and they were willing to listen. Not only that, they were willing to support, and support in a way that I didn't really have before, that I really haven't recognized. And it was nice to be able to have somebody there to help you along with the vision of feeding your people. So the relationship grew from there. And that first year we did the Mohawk red corn. And this corn, like I was talking about earlier, there wasn't a lot left. There wasn't a lot left in that strain of corn right there. But we grew it out. Now I can't remember how many pounds that we had at the time. This was back in, I think it was 2016, maybe, something like that.
We started with 6 pounds.
6 pounds of corn. And we ended up with, I believe, 12 to 1,400 pounds by the end of the growing season.
The first year, yeah.
First year. So we brought that home. We brought that home and reintroduced those seeds back to its homeland, and it took off. It was like, it almost felt like it was saying, thank you for bringing me home. And it did so well. We got so much of it. And we were so happy. We brought all that home. We laid it all out at home in our greenhouses that we had. I think it's on the next slide there, Ken, if I'm not mistaken. Well, maybe I'm getting a little bit too far, but there it is right there. So we laid out all that red corn and we started to make mush from this corn. And we started to experiment with this corn again and to taste it again. And so one of our Yahawi, who is Elvira Sargent's granddaughter, she had a real good idea of, at that time, it was also cider time. So we made cider and we introduced red corn to the cider. We boiled the cider, put the red corn in there and cooked it. And then we all sat down, we ate it. We added strawberries to it, maple syrup, and it was delicious. And so I just sat back thinking how great it is to have this corn back, and how great it was to introduce them back to where they lived. So that collaboration between the farm hub, and I like the collaboration as well, because they have greenhouses. They have things that we don't in order to grow in abundance. And so with the Freedom School, now that who I work for now as well, we are now putting food away for their hot lunch programs. And that's exclusively who I'm working for for now. Even though we have giveaways for the community, and I help with the giveaways because there's a lot of participation in our community with the things that other people are growing that I'm able to add to, which is a great feeling too. And it's all because of this awesome collaboration we have between Seedshed and Farm Hub. In this picture here, that's the Omiyahawi. She's the one that she's the one that said, "Hey, let's do the cider and corn." And back of her is my handsome son. He's the most handsome son that I have. The creator made him that way, so that's him in the background over there. And they're holding the Buffalo Creek squash as well. So I think I'm going to end talking there because I want Ken to speak kind of about the conflicts and the growth and how he feels about the bridges that are being gapped between us as Native people and non-Native people. So Ken, if you can say a little bit to that.
So, you know, that first year we moved very quickly. That conversation I had with Rowan was in May and the visit was early June, and we got stuff in the ground as quickly as possible because of the number of growing days we have here. So there wasn't a whole lot of, what does this relationship really mean? How are we going to work together? How are decisions made? How, you know, how does workflow happen? And so in the years since then, it meant that there were times when things, you know, just like in your garden, there are seasons when things go really well and you have the right amount of rain and the right amount of sun and everything. And there are seasons when you have certain pests or diseases or the things aren't cooperating quite right. You know, the relationship for us between Seedshed, which is a non-native led organization with support staff who are not native, we started finding and bumping up against cultural differences, misunderstandings, lack of education on our side about things that can be triggering, that can bring up feelings around historical trauma. And so, you know, I found over the years, there were kind of different ways we could look at that. We could say, oh my goodness, like, this is terrible. You know, we're not doing a good job. Or we could say, and this was really much of the teaching from Rowan, who's been a guide through this program over the years, that is part of the work. That being willing to face those differences and talk about them and make choices together that address those conflicts when they come up is also part of the work, just as much as being in the garden and growing the plants and saving the seeds and cleaning the seeds and rematriating the seeds home. And so I think, well, I think one of the main lessons that I want to share for non-native folks who might be working is my feeling about what seed rematriation work means and requires has really evolved over the 6 years that we've been doing this together. And I think initially it was just this feeling of like, well, we grow it and then we give the seeds back, and that's what we're doing. But, you know, Kenny and Marion, many of the people who came back year after year to continue working with us started saying, well, what's happening? Here's what's happening to the seeds when they come home. And like, what is our agreement? What is our responsibility as partners to support what needs to happen with the seeds when they're home? Because 4,000 pounds of red corn seed, which is what we had the second year, is a lot of seed for drying down, for cleaning, for storing, for grinding, for packing up, for redistributing to the community. And so even if you're doing this big grow out and this big increase, and then you're just returning that to the community, if the community doesn't have the resources that they need to care for those seeds once they're home, it's not a mutually beneficial relationship, and it's sort of making more work and more need in the community at home than existed before. And so, you know, through a lot of those conversations, that's where we decided that we needed to change our funding flow, the way our funding works to support Akwesasne and the partnership. We needed to change our leadership and decision-making flow. And so that's where the idea of creating a position and hiring Kenny as a full-time team member of Seedshed, where his work is centered at home in Akwesasne, and he's also the link between Akwesasne and what's happening here with Seedshed, and that there's a leadership team, which currently is Kenny and Rowan and Mary, and now Elvira is part of it as well, making the decisions to say, this is what we need, this is how much, this is what we'd like you to do, this is the way we'd like you to do it. These are our needs at home so that we can care for these seeds when they come home and make sure that that's all being supported on both sides of the relationship.
Okay, there's me in the background there with my silly face. But this year, so now what we're doing is white corn. And the white corn that we did this year, I think we started with, I want to say 10 pounds.
20 pounds, yeah.
20 pounds, sorry. 20 pounds, and we were able to get, again, over, just over 1,000 pounds, probably 1,200 to 1,400 pounds of white corn, which is just about depleted now from all the corn washing that we've been doing with workshops at home at the cannery, with the giveaways that we've had, the dehydrating and making a flour corn. So the Freedom School also has been doing benefits to raise money because they need a new school. So the corn comes at a good time as well. We were able to distribute some corn to the schools, the local schools, that because of COVID, families can't really get out really. So they would buy some corn off of us, which was great, because all that money goes towards the making of or the construction of their school, whenever that's going to be, and it's going to cost a lot of money. So every little bit helps. And at the same time, we're able to put a lot of that white corn away for their hot lunch program as well. And so the elders, of course, they were getting theirs first, and then the community next. And it's been a struggle. I mean, the conflicts that we have even at home distributing was, I mean, even the small classes that we have to wash corn, or many of the workshops around food that we have at the cannery, comes with a scariness of COVID. And we've had a couple scares there already. So it's a good thing that we're very prepared. And again, with resources that we have and help and support the Seedshed and Farm Hub, we've been able to, I mean, the Seedshed has been able to purchase, disinfectants for us, hand sanitizers. We got 2 big bottles of hand sanitizers. We have a shipment of N95 masks coming in. I don't know if they're N95, but they're masks. They're coming. And so they've been able to help us out in that regard, because it's hard for one person to do all this work. And we need support, we need help. Community help is starting to pick back up, but because of COVID, it's so difficult. And it's scary, it really is. So we're trying our best, but what we're doing now, we were able to save from that 6 pounds or 20 pounds of seed. I think now we have, you can help me out with this. I think we have 60 pounds now.
For planting, yeah.
For planting.
For replanting.
So, yeah, and I've heard this in different sessions, and I heard Terry Lynn Brant, first time I've ever heard her speak, but say as well that, we have enough to do 10 acres, and we're going to do 10 acres. And well, how are you going to take care of all that corn? That's the question. We have the resources to do that. And we're gonna take full advantage of that while we can, because we need to start stockpiling our food. And I've been saying it for forever. I've been saying it for a long time that we need to put food away. We need to fish. We need to hunt. We need to know our plants and things like that. This is my part. My part is this corn. My part are the beans and the squash, and making sure that people know how to do this, know how to put it away, and that it's available for them to come get. I've seen this year just so many people planting gardens. Something that, and I'll go back to the beginning. I told you that it was so hard to change the people's palates because of Walmart, because of Hannaford's and Price Chopper and all those grocery stores. Now I'm seeing them planting their own gardens. And this was my vision. This is what I wanted to see. This is what I wanted to happen for our community. And this is what the kids came out of that fast talking about. So now I'm seeing it, and I'm so glad to be supported. And I'm so glad that the seeds, because I'll tell you, those ears that I'm holding up right now in this picture, I prayed to them. You know, I asked them for help. That's the relationship that I have to the white corn in my times of trouble, when it feels like it's getting too heavy for me. Hey, look, I got the same hat on as well. But I asked that for help. It's a medicine for me, and I love it. There's been times when my head was hung so low that I didn't want to do this in Akwesasne no more. But I asked that white corn for help. And as one time when I was husking all the corn, I was chopping the ends off with those big scissors, and I was throwing it over the wagon I was sitting in. And at that time, I was almost in tears and frustration, because nobody wanted, it seemed like nobody wanted them. It seemed like they were sad. And I was sad because nobody wanted to plant. You know, no, they were losing that relationship, it seemed to me. And I said, help me personally to get over this feeling that I have. When I was done with that last corn, I looked over that wagon and I saw a beautiful castoa. I seen it. It was just all piled up in and these are the headdresses that we use for ceremony. They were all sticking up. Stay right there. I'll show you. I had to run and go get it, but I'm going to show you. So this is my headdress. And I used those stocks, and I went to midwinter ceremony, and I wore this in the longhouse. And everybody was like, wow, that's amazing. They used to say that, and what they said is it picks your mind up, makes them feel happy, because maybe they felt like that too. And when I walked in with this castoa, that's where I got that idea, was from them. I said, show me something, and they did. And they made this castoa, and it did. It put a new perspective on how I should look at the seeds, how I should look at food, and how I should look at human beings, and even my own self. So the partnership that we have today, I'm going to grow that 10 acres. I'm going to feed our community, and hopefully I'll have enough to distribute as well to those, because white corn's hard to come by sometimes. We run out of seed, we run out of corn, food. So hopefully I can make enough in the future for the rest of my communities as well. And did you want to add? You don't?
I think that's a good place to leave it for now. We'll have time for more conversation after.
Yeah, if anybody has any questions after about any of the topics we discussed, because I know it's a hard subject, especially when it involves non-natives. And I mean, I can help maybe in some way to clear anything up that may come about because of our whatever.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Kenny and Ken, for that excellent presentation about your developing relationship and collaboration there. And for our final speaker, we're going to take it international here. So I want to give a shout out to Sharon, who I see who is on here as well, who is a Mohegan elder who early on in the process where we were developing these panels said, I want you to invite my friend Manuel, who is a professor over at Connecticut College. He's an ethnobotanist and he knows lots of cool things about indigenous seeds all over the world. So Dr. Manuel Lizarralde is a Venezuelan and an associate professor of ethnobotany, teaching in the botany department environmental studies program at Connecticut College since 1998. Dr. Lizarralde's principal research focus is the botanical and ecological knowledge of indigenous peoples of the tropical rainforest with the Bari people of Venezuela, with 35 months of fieldwork over the last 32 years, as well as in New England and experimental archaeology, bow and arrow making for the last 32 years. He's also done ethnobotanical research with the Masagenka of Peru, and is the author of an index and map of South American and indigenous languages. He's the author or co-author of 28 journal articles or book chapters, 3 maps, and 2 books, including a co-edited volume, Neotropical Ethnoprimatology, Indigenous Peoples' Perceptions and Interactions with Non-Human Primates. He's currently working on 3 more books, A Peaceful Longhouse in the Rainforest, The Bari of Venezuela and Colombia, Repatriation and Recovering Local Knowledge in Ethnobotany of Southern New England, and Chaos and Unrest in Venezuela Today, an Eyewitness Account. For the last 21 years, he's been working with the Mohegan and Mashantucket Pequot nations in Connecticut on the reconstruction and uses of traditional bows and arrows, as well as a project reproducing the Iceman's bow from the Neolithic period in Italian Austrian. His teaching includes indigenous people's use of the tropical rainforests, introduction to ethnobotany, coevolution of people and plants, methods and theories of ethnobotany, ethnobotany of Southern New England, environmental anthropology, indigenous cultures and environment of South America, experimental archaeology, and plants that shoot projectiles, ethnobotany of archery. Dr. Lizarralde is also an avid bower, basket maker, plant gatherer, mushroom hunter, spear fisherman, and bull hunter. So a lot of things going on there, but today he's going to tell us a little bit about some of this ethnobotany work he's been doing all around the world. So take it away, Dr. Lizarralde.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. Dr. Hoover, I'm sorry. Okay, so I'm going to share my PowerPoints, which really is a part 2 or collage of different lectures. In order less, I need to have a chapter in the book. I need to retitle, which is instead of repatriation, it should be rematriation, recovering repatriation local knowledge, the ethnobotany of New England. Okay, so the talk today, let me get to the view. It's funny that things change. Oh, let me see. Oh, sorry, when I talk, I'm really bad at multitasking. So, okay, so when Elizabeth and Sharon invited me, I tried to decide what talk or how to coin a talk. And I started to just take a global perspective and then move to the local. And bring the issues about seed preservations in a global and local perspective, in First Nations plant resources. And one thing I probably should do is, and I'm sure Sharon will approve and recommend, Tabutni Gunsi Mundo, thanks you, Great Spirits. Mundo Window, Creator is great. And we have to really acknowledge the great spirits of the creator. So yeah, about my creations or where I'm from. Sometimes my wife told me, give a short answer, and I'll say I'm from my mother, periods. And I realized, oh my God, I'm a matriarchanic, created by my mother. So another word. I was raised in Venezuela. I was born in Princeton, New Jersey, and raised in Venezuela. So I'm really partly Venezuelan, but my background is very complex. And in fact, it's like I learned in my late time, even though my nickname as a teenager was El Indio, the Indian, because I always talk about indigenous peoples. And I'm the dark one in my family. You can see my sister in the middle, Resher, is lighter than me. So I always have this dark skin in the family. So I was salto para atrás, jump to the back, meaning that I'm darker, so I'm smaller than my members of the family. So I discovered that genetically, in fact, my father mentioned that my great-great-grandmother was Kumanagoto Indian. In fact, when I sent my DNA to be analyzed, I'm 7% Native American. So in my heart, in fact, my mind is very indigenous. So it's like I grew up with the Bari people, as you can see in this picture. My father did the first contact in 1960, and I was with them since 1963. So that picture was taken in 1967, 65, sorry. And I did all my studies in Berkeley, although I started in Venezuela, in the Universidad Central de Venezuela. Oh, let's see what's happening here. Okay. So let's move to the thing about, did I jump one slide? Yeah, I did. Most of my PhD research started with the Bari people. And when I was a grad student, I had a choice of either doing demography or the ethnobotany. And since my advisor was the ethnobotanist of Berkeley, and have done fantastic work with the Tzal Mayans, I really realized that I would like to do an ethnobotanical research. And I started to just do it with the Bari people whom I grew up. And as a kid, I was so fascinated with the knowledge of the forest. It's like amazing that they knew the names of every single plant they were around. So for my thesis, I studied their nature of knowledge, how knowledge constructed, and what they knew and what was in the forest. And I'll make it very short. If you want, I can send you the PDF of my thesis. So total, I spent about 35 months of fieldwork between 1988 and 2020. I was there nearby in Cucuta in the region last year. Although I did more field work when I was a teenager and helped my father measure in field sites. And I'm working on the British dictionary too. So one thing about ethnobotany or the botanical knowledge is that it is amazing that we're still finding gigantic species like this very large tree that was first recognized as new species in 2015. This was reported by the Kew Botanical Garden in Washington, I mean, in England. And this is a tree that is 105 metric tons, 5 feet diameter, and 175 feet tall. So we're still finding. In fact, in the Amazon, they also discovered some even much taller trees in this past year. That they're towering many trees in the world. They're over 250 feet tall. So, and the relationship of people with plants is very intrinsic, especially when you are talking about indigenous peoples. For example, the work of Bill Ballet, the Kapur of Brazil employ hundreds of different species of plants in the routine activities. Men and women are constantly using plants in one way or another in their daily activities. So, and another ethnobotanist student of Richard Van Schultes, Earl Smith, which I quote in my thesis, without a true understanding of the world's plant resources, the human race will cease to exist. Even though only we utilize about 200 species of plants as the main food, that's what you find in supermarkets, in the farmer markets. In reality, humans use more than 3,000 domestic species of plants in the world. Plants have been domesticated to produce food. Why do we need plants? Well, we use less than 5% of the world plants for our measured bulk of food. However, plants offer a vast assemblage of resources to humans. And these people use about 30% of their flora. This is the composition of species of plants in the region for food. Each native nations are well known to know between 700 and 1,000 species of plants, and the record is 1,800 species of plants, 1,800 species of plants in Philippines. The potential use of plants by indigenous peoples are so between 50 and 95% of the local flora, which is pretty impressive. It is believed that we know about the existence of 450,000 species of plants, flowering plants. And if you say that 30% is I mean 50 to 94% of them, which this means that 240,000 plants or 150,000 plants can be used for food. And this is not surprising. In fact, as an ethnobotanist, I'm always looking at what is edible there. And I'm mesmerized by how many edible plants are around our flora here or in the world. Even though the Kew Botanic Garden, when you read their reports of the 2016, it mentioned that humans use 5,538 species plants. That's really the biggest herbarium and botanic garden in the world, has the best record. And it is in reality an underestimation of what is available there. The other problem we're facing is the loss of ethnobotanical knowledge because cultures are vanishing. This is a National Geographic Society magazine that was published about 20 years ago by an article by Wade Davis. So very interesting. And one thing is, ironically, it's like the only people left on Earth who has the ecological knowledge to help Western societies to use unknown plants are precisely those societies are really threatened by Western societies. They're in threat of vanishing. When you look at all the indigenous languages in the world, around 500 years ago, there used to be close to 15,000 languages in the world. In 1 century alone, we have lost about 600 languages. Today, we have half, or more half of the 6,800 remaining languages that exist today are highly threatened. 90% of them are indigenous peoples. Also, 90% of the loss on 21st century will be lost by 20th century due to neoliberal policies, well, which are very racist and anti-indigenous peoples, especially also with process Westernization and globalization. And with that, the uneven distribution of resources is like the way that indigenous people are marginalized by many resources, grants, as well as research and so on. So when I was in Ecuador about 21 years ago, I met a young man, Pascual, who was a Paro, and he was looking for an anthropologist to help them. He told me that only 22 members of the tribe spoke the languages, and there were only 114 of them alive. When I did a map of languages in South America, I thought this tribe was gone, and I was wrong. It was existent. Although today they're all gone. The ones who spoke the languages, unfortunately. And the anthropologist who worked in them also died of heart attack a few years ago without completing his work. This is a map that I produced with the help of Luisa Maffei and Gonzalo Oviedo, who was director of the Department of Indigenous Peoples in World Wildlife Fund. And they really needed to make a map of locating where are all the indigenous peoples of the world. And they're represented by little black dots. Unfortunately, this map is huge. You cannot see it. And I created a database for that. So, and it was close to 7,000 languages, what I have found from different bibliographic resources. The other problem we're facing today is deforestation, as well as overharvesting of resources, especially plants, in all different ecosystems. Today, we only have about 50% of the forests that used to be in the prehistorical time. And the most affected biome or ecosystem is the tropical rainforest, which covers just 6% of the dry surface of the earth. And it holds between 60 and 75% of species of animals and plants. Unfortunately, the global rate of deforestation today is close to 2.2%, which means each year we lose about 80% of the size of New England. This is thinking about losing mostly Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Rhode Island, and a little bit more of Vermont and so on. And in fact, people don't realize that the tropical deforestation is not like deforesting the tundra or temperate forest. This forest has trees that are 2 or 3 times much density in wood than temperate trees. So it means that they're releasing sometimes twice more CO2 by the same volume. So it is estimated that they produce about 30 or 40% of CO2. So each year we're losing about 1,000 to 10,000 species of plants, animals, and mushrooms due to environmental modifications like deforestation, pollution, as well as unsustainable harvesting. And if we count microorganisms, then the number is much, much higher because we don't know about microbes, all the other microorganisms that are in these environments. Currently, 25% of the species of plants in the world are near extinctions. This means about 120,000 species of plants. And deforestation is one of the globalist challenges with deforestation. I'm sorry, one of the global challenges with deforestation is the loss of biodiversity. And that means also the loss of a lot of seeds that are important for foods, especially endemic native seeds. Today, it is believed that the world could have as much as 30 to 100 million species of plants and animals. Although the most conservative standard is belief number is about 14 millions. Even though today we probably don't know more than 3 million of them. So, and even though deforestation is not new, when you look at the original cover forest in the top of what was the forest in the world, and you can see what was in 2005. That's the most recent map I could find. Even though you can see maps in different publications, like for example, the cause of deforestation by oil palm, you can see it's mostly in Central Africa, as well as in Indonesia, Sumatra. So even South America, in fact, I've seen a lot of deforestation of palm oil in the territory of Bari here in Venezuela too. There are huge areas. Also, another aspect that I want to cover, and this is part of a book, a publication, a chapter I wrote, it is the interdependence of indigenous peoples and their flora. In fact, the independence is very intrinsic, very compact, very rich. There's a lot of connections. Especially when we look at the Amazon forest, which holds about 90,000 species of plants, there is about 380 different indigenous societies. So even though in Brazil alone, 87 of the 230 groups known to exist by 1900 were extinct by 1957. This is a work by the late anthropologist Darcy Rivera, who really mentioned about the genocide of Brazilian Indians. And currently, the administration of the current president of Brazil has really indicated they're going to develop the Amazon, which means deforestation, and they cut down about 50% of rainforest. This is going to be a really incredible tragedy for all of us in many ways. And this will be a loss to our greatest ethnobotanical treasure of the earth, because the estimate by 1950s, like we'll probably lose 40% of this forest, which is about one and a half size of the US. And just a reminder, when you think about 1 acre forest in Connecticut, you have about maybe 30 or 40 species of plants. But when we talk about 1 acre forest in the Amazon, you have up to 600 species of plants. And some of them are found only in very few places. So, which means that the dispersion of them is much greater. Also, there is a fantastic amount of human knowledge and botanical wealth, which is really mesmerizing. Each time I read more, I discover how complex it is and how rich it is. And even though Janice mentioned two things that I really like it very much, rematriation, but Janice mentioned about one thing that we shouldn't call climatic change or climatic adaptations. In fact, that's what most indigenous people do. They're climatic adapting constantly. although these climatic changes are too dramatic for a lot of these people to adapt, unfortunately. So in the magnitude of deforestation and also the displacement of them. For example, the most culturally diverse place in the world is just New Guinea, Papua New Guinea, which has close to 1,000 indigenous languages or cultures, followed by Nigeria with around 430 of them. But Nigeria density was caused by the time of when slaving was very important, and a lot of societies trying to escape from slavers and move and migrated to safe havens. And that's why Nigeria as well, Cameroon has all these different languages, because people are trying to escape from being enslaved on colonial times. Although the loss of this vast knowledge the Native people have, it is our loss. Each language, each culture, when you lose their knowledge, is like burning a whole library. And it's lost forever. In fact, the accumulated vast amount of local ecological knowledge, a lot of people use the traditional ecological knowledge, TEK, but lately it's been discussed that it's better to use local ecological knowledge. And if you think about what Janice said, following this climatic adaptation, languages are not traditional. They are not stuck on time. They're always evolving. So that's why we use the term local ecological knowledge too. The accumulation of this knowledge through the millennia has been really impressive. When you look at, for example, the Quechua or Incas in Peru or the Mayans, they have accumulated knowledge because of the many thousand years of the relationship to the environment. And this knowledge, it becomes much more complex. For example, the Mayans probably knew close to 1,000 species of plants for use for medicine, as an example. So, and I'm trying to move a little faster because I'm sure that Elizabeth is trying to tell me.
Yeah, no, we're definitely out of time.
Yeah, so I trying to move a little fast. Let me see if I can really, maybe just wait on these things. My work with the buddies already mentioned. It's just I was amazed about their knowledge. And in fact, I expanded the uses to also indirect uses too. So you can see that I included foods, fuel, medicine, house construction, technology, like looms and bow makings and baskets, timber. They combine all of uses, and then the trees that provide food for the animals they hunt. So, which means indirect uses. So, in fact, this is really a very limited number of uses. There's many more, especially the ecological mentions. One thing is important to notice that most people, I asked my students how many species of plants they know, and it's like they probably have a hard time mentioning 50 of them. But then a shaman in the Amazon knows probably between 500, 600 species of plants. That's what a plant taxonomy does too. So in fact, the Baris, to my knowledge, I have the information about 568 species of plants. Even though the Baris themselves, the elders told me that some of them knows about 1,500 of them. So, and when you think about local flora of Connecticut, there's about 2,200 species of plant known. For the US, 19,000 species of plants, and so on. So let me see, I probably mentioned this already. But then the number of 3,000 species of plants that are domesticated and used, the seeds for foods, I think that is a little larger than this. So it's just, I think that it's a conservative number. So, and just think about this. And for Southern New England, the best work, in fact, Gladys Tantaquidgeon, the medicine woman of the Mohegans, really preceded Richard Schultes, who's called the father of ethnobotany in America. We should call Gladys Tantaquidgeon the mother of ethnobotany in America. So, because she started 20 years before Richard Schultes. In fact, she started working with the Delawares and recorded the knowledge of 134 species of plants. In the meantime, she was collecting information about the Mohegans through their grandmothers and great-grandmothers. and she had a list of 92 species plants in her latest publication. So as Janice mentioned about the map of the local tribes, I'm trying to really make my own maps because of the information that we have for this work on the recovering and rematriation of local knowledge. And the groups are on bold and black are the ones we have information about the ethnobotanical knowledge. The ones on gray, I don't have that. Maybe they are available there. They need to be really recovered. For this area, so far, I have really collected information about 314 species of plants and 494 uses, of which 149, even though it has 48, are used for foods. This number is changing, so each time I learn new things. And in fact, this is a pie chart of all the uses, and it's amazing the knowledge of the pharmacopedia, medicinal plants by the local tribes, which is 41%. And it's around over 200 species of plants. But for food, you can see that this is pretty impressive. It's close to 30%, sorry. So it's just a third. And that's pretty standard in the world for the local flora. And the more I learn about local flora, it's amazing about how many edible things they are. So and Native American have been here for a very long time. This is a blade a friend of mine found it, and it's 9,000 years old from Maine. So, and she found another one too. So I convinced her to report it to local archaeologists. So she should give it to them, to our local museum. And when the first Europeans, when they arrived here, they're really amazed about how tall and healthy and well-proportioned were Native Americans, because food was really well supplied. Even though Indigenous peoples are seen as invisible here, there are about 36,000 members of different tribes. And I won't go in detail because it's not very important for you guys, but the last speakers died in the early 1900s. So Philadelphia Feeling, who spoke mostly Mohegans and English and wrote in Mohegan, died in 1908. And you can see that Lydia Fidelia and Messi Nonshot died in 1919. That's probably the grapefruit time. So be careful with COVID-19 too. And
all right, Manuel, I'm sorry, we have to stop because we have to wrap this up. And there is one question here from the audience about the main theme of the panel, which is about collaborating on seed projects. So I don't know if you want, if you have any like just last 2 words. Oh, you're muted. But we definitely have to wrap up. We've gone over the panel. Oh, you're muted. Oh, there we go.
Sorry. Yeah, let me finish because that I'm touching that aspect. And one thing about New England is that it was not wild. It was a cultural landscape. It was a cultural landscape. It was managed. It was managed to be very productive. There's wild plums, pit seed, good foods, which is very productive, very important. So wild grapes, not so wild grapes, but they call it wild, but they manage, as well as common sunflowers. Let me see, as well as wild rice. And agriculture came about 1,100 years ago, but American chestnut was a very important source here. In fact, 20% of the trees in New England were really as high as 30% were chestnuts, and very important producing foods for the local tribes until the terrible epidemic of fungi in 1920. So the other ones are ramps. Ramps are really, and ramps can be managed and distributed. In fact, I've been collecting seed and spraying them all over the woods to propagate them. I found a fantastic patch in Turkey Hills this past spring. So all important cultivar here is cranberries. Along in New London, there's 55 different bogs that are used to collect cranberries. Another important plant was Indian potato, or common groundnuts. There's also groundhog, another one. Jerusalem artichokes is incredible, very productive plants. It's almost like a weed. And other ones are really more wild, but you can harvest is a cattail.
Okay,
And
Manuel,
two
people
more
are starting to
slides.
leave, and there's some questions about the main theme of the panel that I want to make sure that we get into.
Can I talk my last slides?
I think we've gone over quite a bit, so I want to make sure to get to Elena's question about approaching and creating some of the collaborations that Kay and Kenny developed and that Janice had described in the bit. So I don't know if our other two initial presenters want to drop any hints for Elena or other panelists who came here today to learn more about this kind of collaborative relationships. What are some of the first steps that go into if Elena wanted to enter one of these kind of collaborative relationships with a tribal community or a tribal seed project? So Kay or Kenny or Janice, I don't know if you want to just real quick, because I know you guys have to go to some other panels as well. We've gone over quite a bit. But if you had any advice, just real quick advice. And I also want to invite everybody to come tonight at 6 o'clock for the kind of open session about native seeds and seed keepers. But I just want to open it up real briefly for you guys to kind of mention some of the tips you might have for other people looking to develop these kind of collaborations.
Yeah, I mean, I can speak to do your due diligence. I mean, find out who those people are, who the organization is, what their intentions are, if they're on the same page as you, and your visions are the same, if your aspirations are the same, and it looks like it's a good fit for your community to go with someone that wants to help in that way. I think is a good starting point to see if their intentions and if they're a good fit for you in your community. That's the only suggestion that I can offer. I don't know if that answers your question.
I think for non-native folks, really, looking back, I wish that I had been in a situation where I had more time to do self-questioning around why. Why do I want to engage in this partnership? Why, what is the real role of our organization? Because we bumped up against that later and had to, shift and make changes around that, and are continually doing that. And I think, again and again, when Kenny and I have done other presentations and non-native people in the audience, have a real interest or passion or curiosity about doing this, the things that we as non-native people need to think about is saviorism, white saviorism, which can often be a motivation for wanting to do something. And I think the self-questioning around that and working through that first is really important. And so sometimes, just jumping into something feels good to everybody, but then that means there's going to be these questions coming up later. So that's one thing looking back that I would say I think is important for the non-native people here who might be interested in it. Why? And then, like Kenny was saying, the relationship building piece is really essential.
I could say something too, just, and I think Ken Greene, you mentioned it about rematriation. When people are thinking about that and thinking about these relationships, I know we made it really clear when we first met the sisters that we really had nothing, no resources, literally nothing. And, part of the reason that, like, so I agree that relationship building is so important. And then also, like with the wampum belt, it helped us too, because it said we'll renew this relationship from time to time, you know, and come back and visit it and see if things are okay, not just the seeds, but maybe we need more help, or maybe we need more resources, and not just to pass away the seeds without, you know, that relationship of also wanting to continue to help, I guess. So yeah, it was really great. Really great day.
Excellent. Well, since Janice opened us up, Kenny, do you want to quick close us down before everyone has
Sure.
to head out?
Wana noa I heda wawe, ne yo yo he, asa dawari one hodo, ne jina hoda su. Wate wana dunyo, ya ki de yongwa ni gungruni. Dogana hoda sangoya do ni gungla. Ji sa wayo dotsa, gitne ona, waguli wayo dakwa. Ne, ndiza watka we, kana wana dutsala. E tonio do haknungwa ni gung. We have now arrived at the place where all of our words, all of the things we have named, it was not our intention to leave anything out. So if we have forgotten something, we ask that the individual to send your greetings and your thanks in their own way. And now all our minds are one, and we can continue on and go to our next venue.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you all for coming here today. Thank you especially to our fabulous presenters. And as I mentioned, there's a session at 6 o'clock that's sort of an open space for people to come and gather and see who else is working on seed stuff in the Northeast around native seeds. So thank you so much, and I'll see you later.
Bye, Liz.
Yawa,
Bye.
anagiwahe.
Thank you.
Anna.